Hello and welcome to Hard Corners. I'm Waddell Hardy III, author and founder of Fathers Reinvested, Inc. It's a nonprofit organization for fathers. This is one of three segments of a family podcast series. The podcast series is called Fearlessly Made in the City of Wynn. In this segment, today's topic is the police, the public. My guests offering their perspective on this topic are Dr. Heather Ferguson Tillman, community psychologist, private agency foster care program manager consultant, who has been in the child welfare field for 30 years and is currently planning to open a private counseling practice in 2022.
Hello.
Welcome, Doctor.
Hello, everyone.
I have Minister Larry Shores of Building God's Kingdom, who's just joined us.
Good evening, everyone.
And last but not least, I have Ty Q. Ty, give us a little background on yourself.
Sure thing. Let me make sure my mic is good. Hello, everyone. So a little bit about me. I am a Chicago transplant since the 90s, military brat. So I've lived in Asia, Europe, and on both coasts. My family is pretty heavily involved in law enforcement and military. My mother just retired from the ATF. My background is I started off with an alternate candidacy to West Point and worked my way through some other things and ended up going the private route and have been a member of the DHS task force with the United States Secret Service as an industry member since 2008 and have done work with the FBI as a contractor for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So I have a couple different viewpoints and obviously my experience as well as being a citizen and having contact with the police in a non-official manner. So that's kind of my background as well.
Okay, so we're gonna dive right into today's topic, police and the public. First question on the board. And we're gonna start with Larry, we're gonna move around to Dr. Ty, you're gonna chime in, I'm gonna be the last one to speak, and we'll just kind of go back and forth on this. The first question
No
is,
problem.
what is your perspective of what law enforcement is?
I would say law enforcement is based on protection of the people, protection of the law, and the protection of one's rights.
Doctor?
I agree. I believe that when I think about police in general, I think of the times that I felt safe, when I called to ask for help, when I had to reach out for direction. So I look at the police as, again, protection. Someone who can solve a problem. And I just have a different outlook on some of the things that I've been seeing recently.
Okay. Ty?
Okay, for me, law enforcement and police in particular, they do represent everything that you two have just mentioned. I agree. I'm more of the officer-friendly belief system that, hey, they're here, they're supposed to help us, right? But the reality that we sometimes encounter is that police are often there in the aftermath. They're there to help maintain the evidence scene, put things together, and figure out the whys of what happened. And in the best case scenario, we're lucky if we have a beat officer there to stop something from happening or prevent it just by being present. So to me, it's protection in a couple different ways. It's sort of a mental outlook on them as a public servant, as someone trying to give back to the community that they're in, but also as a deterrent. So police don't really stop things necessarily unless they're present and can do so. And in some instances, they have different rules of engagement depending upon what city or municipality they're attached to, and they can't even step in unless something is imminent, right? So I do agree with the overall theme of protection, but I think nowadays it's awful. It's almost like evidence preservation and deterrent is the main role.
Okay. My perspective of what the police department is, law enforcement in a whole, I would have to go to a pie scale. With that pie scale, I would define off explaining first, there's a difference between being a regular police officer and being what I consider a law enforcement specialist. A regular police officer is a person who goes out, responds to radio calls, writes tickets, completes reports, makes arrests, answers the regular calls of duty for an officer. But a law enforcement specialist does all those things, but then expounds on them. This officer will go out and analyze what it is that he or she is dealing with on a day-to-day basis, the problems, the issues of concern in that area that they're working. They'll get out, they'll walk, they'll interact publicly with the community as well as the businesses to ascertain any information that they feel is relevant to the tools that they're gonna use to resolve whatever that concern is. They go in, they sit down, they plan out, they design a system that might work, they implement it, and take notes on what needs to modify and change, and work to reduce that crime or those type of incidents in that area, thereby developing a strong relationship with the community as well as the businesses, and providing to them that, hey, these officers that we deal with on our beat are approachable, and we can come and we can make requests, we can get better interactions, we get some answers. A law enforcement specialist knows that they don't know it all, but they will endeavor to try to get the answer that is put before them. Now, taking that pie scale, the measurement for me, in my perspective, is 65% of that pie is your everyday police officer going out there to do the job. 20% of that pie is law enforcement specialists. That last remaining amount is those individuals that continue to keep law enforcement in the news in a negative view. That being said, that 65% is more of a gray area. You have people that can shift in either direction. They have the potential to be law enforcement specialists. Some are content where they are, but they're so connected to the 15%, meaning that, you know, these could be people that they see, they live next to, they went to school with, their kids do sports together. You know, they hang out, they chime in with each other, and sometimes may not have that ability to see where that person in that 15% has done something that is wrong and recognize it for what it is. So having that gray area, for the most part, that 65% is going to do the job. That 20% is going to go the extra mile. That's my perspective on what law enforcement is as it stands right now. The question that follows up on that is, what is your perspective of what law enforcement should be, given today's circumstances within the past 5 to 10 years?
So it's a lot of things we could chime in on as far as what we think law enforcement shouldn't be. But there were
What it should be.
3 things that stood out to me after the two of you spoke. Ty touched on engagement. Is it clear to the public what the rules of engagement are? You said enforcement, law enforcement, as opposed to the regular police officer. So, on my perspective, I would say that here's the thing: enforcement. Enforcement of what? Enforcement of public protection, enforcement of the law in general. That's where I think the gray area is. The public's understanding of what the police and law enforcement, what their duty really is.
Well,
Because now, from a perspective of the public, law enforcement and the police are supposed to be for the people, not versus the people. It's seen nowadays as 2 separate entities on opposite sides, as opposed to one entity and institution supporting the preservation and protection of the other entity. The police, law enforcement, is supposed to work for the people.
I agree. And when I spoke of the difference between the police officer and the law enforcement specialist, again, a law enforcement specialist, when I say law enforcement specialist, I'm not just talking about making the arrest or enforcing particular laws, but it's also about interacting with the community, getting the understanding of what it is that they need. The only way that you're going to properly be able to provide a police service to any group of people is you have to get out the car, you have to sit down, you have to watch, you have to learn, you have to interact and try to understand the people whom which you're serving, who you're providing the service to, instead of operating off what you may think you know, or what somebody prospectively told you, or what you were raised to believe. You have to go out and you have to spend the time within that community. Let me see how people move in this community, how they communicate, so I have a better understanding, so I don't overreact or underreact in a given situation. And law enforcement doesn't necessarily mean going and locking somebody up. That's the title. Law enforcement means that your community is encouraged to work with you on more than just the avenue of locking somebody up or taking or observing somebody's rights. It's about making it so whenever something is going on in the community, this person seen in that particular light, in that particular position, is also human and can relate to human factors and not just a stone cold, we just follow what the department policies say and that's it. We have no gray area to move. And unfortunately, there are people within law enforcement who don't understand how that works. This career is a thinking person's career. You have to think, assess, reevaluate, act. It's a constant progression. You keep doing it every given situation because no situation is going to be the same. You can follow a book all day and then go into the real world and the variables are going to change. And if you don't know how to take what you learned from the book and adjust the variables in order to solve the problem, you're not going to be successful in the field. You're not going to be able to provide the services that the community needs. I know mostly in our community, the interaction with the police has a negative. Most of the interactions have been negative. So they're already prepared for when the blue lights cut on. All right, here come the drama. Here comes some BS. You know, what I do? Why am I being stopped? The other side of it is it's not being provided with enough information to understand what the law is and what their options are. If you're more informed, then you can provide better behavior and better movement. Our community don't have enough transitional or reformatory systems and able to just to handle the basic things. And we don't have an active system in between to liaison between the public and the police department to do the translation, to bring a better understanding. Thus, this is where we have been in the past, 5-10 years?
I can agree with what you're saying, and it's great that you can orate and explain the differences. But as you aforementioned, the general public does not have the perception of the definitions. They don't look at the police department and law enforcement or law enforcement specialists as being different things. It's all one thing to them. Isn't the police supposed to do all that? Is it general thinking? So the issue is, and you also spoke about the job. So is the general police officer's mentality is that this is a job or this is a duty? You're sworn in correctly,
You are.
right? You're sworn in
You are.
to uphold certain things.
You are.
And those things are supposed to be above and beyond anything else. But what you're swearing into is the service to the public underneath
Right.
certain guidelines. And I know Ty can mention this, having a military background like I do, take into consideration the military police. It's a smaller circle, but understand there's no gray area when dealing with the military police because you know exactly what you can and what you can't do. And you understand what your restraints are and everything. So, unfortunately, we don't have the same thing with public law enforcement. It's certain things the military police can't do, certain things they can do. And
Yep. Adele knows too. I mean, UCMJ is kind of rough, you know, compared to what we have on the civilian side. But one thing I did want to add is I see that us versus them mentality that you're mentioning. I will also add a little bit to my background. I am a gearhead. So I ride motorcycles, I drive fast cars, and I've been pulled over and profiled for doing nothing else but getting a haircut. I was in Inglewood with my wife, and that's where my barber is. And we pulled off, and I got pulled over and asked, hey, you got a tail light out. And it come to find out it wasn't a tail lighted out. The other officer in the car has a Mustang, and he wanted to find out all about my car. Now, that ended up harmless because I have the attitude that I have. I have the background that I have. But I can imagine someone else being upset, and I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach too. When the lights come on, I'm like, "What the hell did I do now? I know I didn't do nothing. So why are you harassing me?" And I have to calm down. That's my inner voice starting to go off. But then my rational side kicks in and realize, okay, let me find out what the story is here. Do they have a rash of incidents here? Am I fitting a profile of a known, maybe a street racer or something like that over here? Hopefully that's it, right? Because the reason why I believe the us versus them exists is because some people take this, as you said, as a job, not as a duty, even though they take a very similar oath to what anybody that swears in under DOD or any other federal office takes, right? You have to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, we can be the enemy of the Constitution sometimes and not realize that. We can break people's rights when we pull them over without just cause. I don't know. I don't know if I really support stop and frisk. I get it. It works, but the way that it's applied can be so very harmful. Very, very harmful. If I'm walking down the street with my family on Michigan Avenue and something happens, why am I being picked on? Do I have to be wearing my Rolex and my nice clothes and not be bothered? And mind you, I have Rolexes, I have Omegas, and I wear those, but I don't even keep a flashy band. I use a NATO band. That's just how I am. You'd have to know, a little bit about something to know that I even got that. I'm not really a flashy guy like that. But anyhow, so the us versus them, my solution to that, my commentary on that is, I feel like officers should serve the communities they are from. Please don't send homie from Wrigleyville to police in Morgan Park. Please don't do that. He can't relate. He cannot relate. I don't want to deal with him. I think in terms of police reform, if we have beat cops that are from the neighborhoods that they patrol, they retain that kind of Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith dream state where the officer is someone you can come to for help, right? This is not some outsider with some SWAT fantasy trying to come up through the ranks and get marks on his belt, like, oh, I've done these many busts and blah, 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 blah. That's not what it's for. That's not what it's for. That's never been my opinion of what it's for. And when I encounter officers like that, my attitude changes. I know my rights. I have an attorney on retainer. Let's go. But
Okay.
that's what the problem is. Yep.
What I think the focus should return to, as Ty said earlier, prior to me coming here, I kind of jotted something in the margin because I tried to think about what police work looked like when I was younger. So we're talking like maybe 40, 50 years ago. So at that time, we did have the officer friendly who came into the classrooms, who would make someone an honorary police officer for the day, who gave us coloring books so it would kind of reenact an encounter with the police so people would know how to handle getting stopped by the police or asking the police for help and things of that nature. So I think it was important for children at a younger age to be accustomed to seeing a police officer in a good light. So when they would come to the schools, it made us comfortable. We were like, oh, the officer friendly is going to be here this week. Or, because they would come once a month. So again, having that type of interaction that's more of a positive nature would make people feel a little bit more at ease. I also remember as I got older how some police officers would come to my neighborhood and play basketball with some of the youth that were out there. So what you said, Wadale, about people having interaction in a community and walking the beat and things of that nature, that would help people feel more comfortable with policing. I would represent my agency at the CAPS meetings every month. So they would give us statistical data regarding the different crimes that happen in the area, some great activities that were going to be happening for the community, and how we went about helping the police. as opposed to seeing them as someone that was adversarial. How we could go about being spot watchers and forming our neighborhood watches and getting the number for everyone on our block so we could call and look out for each other. Because police can't do this by themselves. You know, it's not enough police to really patrol every area in Chicago at one time. So the citizens have to, in tandem, develop a relationship with police officers so we can work together because they can't do it by themselves.
Well, can we say from what we're saying that there's a distrust of the public for the police department and law enforcement period?
2000.
And if so,
2000%.
what do you think is the contributor to that distrust?
What's contributing now is that because we have access to social media, we're able to see some of maybe isolated cases that are spotlighted that show cops that are bad cops in a certain specific area at a specific time. They're showing it, they're sharing it, and they're saying, "Oh my God, this is what's happening." But it might have been an isolated incident, so it's getting blown out of proportion. Yes, I do think that we do have some corrupt cops, but the majority of them are not. So now that we get a chance to see that and share it and make memes about it and get our own thoughts about it, it's making people fearful. So the reform should focus on how they can reach that type of audience. If we can reach an audience showing them how a youth is getting gunned down without having a weapon on them, or who's acting or who has some type of mental health incapacity, then we should be able to show the times when police officers were doing things that were gallant, that were doing things that were wonderful. It should be the same type of sharing. And we don't get that. We don't see when an officer, saves a little boy from his head being stuck in the railing or something. We don't see those type of things often. We don't want to share that. We want to share violence. We want to share the horrific end of it. And that's just because everybody has more access to social media. So I would really want to see more of the community coming to the CAPS meeting. Sometime I would be the only one in the CAPS meetings. So you have all these people from your district sitting at the table ready to help you, and I'm sitting there about to eat a whole bunch of pizza by myself and soda because no one else showed up. And so we have to be accountable too for what goes on in our community.
I agree with everything that was said. Unfortunately, we live in that kind of world where the negative is going to always be pushed to the forefront. There are some people that think that negativity is the only thing that sparks change. Media feels that way from the get-go. The more negative, bad things we put out here, the better chance something of a resolutionary thing will happen. Right. I know you mentioned earlier, Ty said conflict resolution, right? A lot of us have that thought process where's the conflict resolution as far as law enforcement is concerned? We see fights break out in public all the time, and the first thing out of everybody's mouth is, where's the police? Where's the police? Where's the police? Who's on beat? Who's on duty? What's going on? Right. And then we have all these crimes against each other that go unclosed, unsolved, unresolved, because no one has any leads or any information or anything on who did this and why. Right. So it's amazing that Ty mentioned something earlier that Officer Hardy and I have actually discussed in the past briefly about where are you pulling your law enforcement officers from? They're not from the neighborhood, as Ty said. They don't live around here, grew up here, know the neighborhood, know the people, have a connection. The problem with that, Ty, is that if they did that, and I hate to have the race card come into anything, but we would have so few non-African American and Hispanic cops if that was the case. And they're not letting that happen. Also,
to your point.
Also, if that were to be the case, a lot of what you see is fear of corruption. if everybody knows Officer Hardy in the neighborhood, Officer Hardy is more in depth to becoming a corrupt cop, because how much is he gonna push that envelope and hold the law if it's someone he knows, someone he likes, someone he's related to, or someone that he knows is related to that person, and so on and so forth down the line. So that's another reason why we'd have a really hard time making that a reality. But I do agree with the concept. I do agree with his pie chart as far as, man, it would be nice if we could have a certain percentage of police officers in that area from that neighborhood.
You got it. That's exactly what I'm going to say. It's not binary. It's not, no, everybody got to be from the hood. No, you can't have that, because like you said, what if JoJo's uncle is a big time GD, and now he's like, oh, I'm going to let him slide because that's my uncle's cousin and blah, blah. No,
Absolutely.
You can't have that.
Absolutely.
So you do have to have a blend, right? But it has to be more representative. And it's not just along racial lines, because, you know, even in Morgan Park, you go across Western, you run into all them cats from Mount Greenwood. And,
absolutely.
You know, some other neighborhoods. It's a little bit different, right?
Little Irish neighborhood.
They look at us different. They treat us a little different. I sat down. See, so I'm a mutt. I'm all type of mixed up, all right? So, but my wife looks predominantly phenotypically black. So we got all types of crazy looks. And we were just sitting down at a hamburger joint. Where were we? We were in Evergreen Park. And I'm like, you've never seen this before? Why are you looking at me crazy? I'm a man, so I'm not going to get into it with these ladies. But my wife was about to smack this one woman because it's the craziness. But anyway, you're going to have that blend. And my concern also is tone at the top, right? If the people at the top came up from the bottom, they've worked their way up. They're not just somebody that we imported in because they have some rank and they've done something in another city, or they came from a federal agency and decided to cool out in Chicago. And, you know, I'm walking to, you know, a high level policing position because of my federal experience. And that's happened, right? Didn't we have that with Jody?
Yeah.
Didn't he say, oh, we're all going to get AR-15 so we can fight these
That's
gangs?
right.
Da, da, da. That's one way to do it, but we're talking, that's super militant. You might as well just call SWAT. If you have to have that in for every day, there's a disconnect, right? And this whole thing about, Doctor, you said you were at CAP meetings by yourself. It's not just the CAP meetings. How many of you know about the Police Explorers program? How come the kids ain't in that?
Right.
I've been on rides as a little kid. I can't tell you how many other of my peers, and you know, they said, oh, I want to join the Army, or I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a cop. That actually still happens. Little kids, they're taught to fear the police, or have had a bad experience when they saw mommy or daddy get pulled over and had some rude stuff happen to them.
Well,
So you have to come at it, you know, on multiple levels to correct the issue. In my opinion, there's that, and as a community, we got to be responsible. And mind you, this is something I learned from one of the pastors at a church I had attended. He brought up the point where Jesus said something of the effect, "I am in the world, but I am not of the world." I cannot listen to today's rap music. I cannot watch a lot of these TV shows because it's all poison. And it started back early. Like, it started in the 90s. After Rodney King happened, NWA came up with F the Police. Is there an F the Fireman song? Think about that for a minute. Why is that? Is there an F the EMT song? There's not.
well,
some of that-
let's address that. Let's address that. Because in the past 50 years, for us, not much have changed. We think that it has. We give a skewed perspective of how things have changed, but it really hasn't changed. Reason why there's such a disconnect in our community with the police is because of what the police have always been used for in our community.
Correct.
You know, you have people who have been arrested, harassed, beaten, killed. Pause, y'all. All right, we still in.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Who've had these different perspectives about what's been going on in their community, and a lot of things haven't changed. There's definitely a distinct distrust of the community, but when you talk about putting more of what's in that community into that community to police it, in our community, first thing you got to realize is most of us, don't make a difference what your status is, suffer from some form of PTSD.
Right.
We suffer from some form of PTSD. And we get into these positions and we still haven't overcome the Willie Lynch syndrome. And that plays a lot of role in what we do. We get into these positions and we don't do enough for each other. Part of of what makes an officer more motivated to do better. Not every officer, because I feel like it takes the individual effort of an officer to be seen different from the negative portrayal by the public or by the media. But what benefits them is when they're recognized in some capacity as somebody that have actually tried to come into the community and affect a change. I mean, and it could be anything from a complimentary letter from a citizen sent in to the superintendent to a supervisor recognizing a reduction on a particular crime or the advancements of this officer's interactions within the community, the cohesiveness becoming stronger in the community because of this particular officer or these officers. Those type of things help to motivate a person to, hey, let me do a little bit more. I got the ball rolling really good here, let me keep it going. Right. And I'm breaking down some lines where people are recognizing, okay, all of us ain't, jerks or jagoffs. I've seen a lot of violation of civil rights, but a lot of it is because we're not educated enough to know what our rights are. A lot of things that we do or have had done to us is because we didn't know to question it or what options we had on the table to address it. And part of that problem is, again, misinformation or no information. Before you say, I would say, yeah, we need to have some more of us in our community. But I do still feel like you need to have other diversities there because they're going to come across us somewhere in the city. Right. And if they come across if they come across us somewhere in the city, they need to have had the experience of being around us and had the opportunity to know us before acting on what they think they know or what they may have heard or what they may have seen somewhere else. And it shouldn't be influenced by somebody else who's less informed than they are to motivate them to do the wrong thing.
Right. You don't want to end up in a situation where we have de facto segregation all over again, where all the guys that stay over by Wrigley Field, they stay by Wrigley Field, right? And it's very diverse up there now, but I know it didn't used to be. Even as recent, in my opinion, the 50s is not a long time ago.
Yeah, not much.
I have to remind people all the time. I'm like, wasn't your grandma alive under Jim Crow laws?
Mm-hmm.
You forgot already? That went a long time ago. Yeah. Have you ever seen a picture of Dr. King in color? There's lots. They do that on purpose to make you think it was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So I remind people all the time, there's that, like you said, I don't think we should get to the point where we're doing de facto segregation on ourselves yet again. You can't do that. Nobody really benefits. But at the same, there needs to be a check in place because the problem with that is, and there's lots of social experiments, and I don't have a PsyD background or anything like that, but like the Milgram experiment, right? Like how if you put people in a room, they'll find ways to divide each other up. Like I'll give you a story from my experience as a military brat. I noticed where I was living in continental Europe at the time. People that I would normally get along with over here, someone that might look like a skinhead or something like that. The moment they hear your accent, that you speak American English, not British English, you're another American, and you're a stranger in a strange land. Magically, you link up, and it's cool. But get you back on home turf. Let's get back stateside and see how they act when they see you in the street. It's not going to be the same. So that's why I say there has to be a balance and a blend of people that can relate to the community that they're serving. Because if they're not, then they're serving in the bad sense of the word. Like they only here to come up on a fine, or they're only here to tell us to stop doing something. They're never here to help us, and that has to stop because the impression that people get is, oh, you square if you know your rights. Oh, you studied all those? I mean, like I remember a few years back when there was a push by the ACLU, flexyourrights.org, and I know there's some people that probably do it in the wrong way and not study, but when you get pulled over, what can you do? How do you react? Things like that's a very common and unfortunately, it's sometimes exclusive experience that people have with law enforcement, and I don't think that should be the case, right? Again, I'm biased because it's so heavy in my family, my friends, but
I'm glad you said that because my next point in question on the table, implicit bias, a bias or prejudice that is present but not consciously held or recognized. Do you believe that everybody has that?
I do. The reason why I say that I do believe that we have our own, what I say is our personal bias, and it's something that we have to work through. It's because you have societal norms, you have your family norms, you have the different ways that you've grown up, the different things that you've seen, and how you view the world, your worldview, and then you try to incorporate that into your daily living and the different changes that happen in the course of your daily living. So if I already have in my mind that when I see something that is going to go wrong, if the cop pulls up behind me and I'm going to be scared, then that's a bias that I've already formed because I've seen something happen. Despite the fact that it's never happened to me before, despite the fact that I've never really had a bad experience with a police officer, I just have that internal uneasiness because of the things that I've seen. So how can I judge someone if I've never experienced it?
Absolutely, and thank you, Ty, for opening the door up for me to go biblical. But greater the he that is in me than the me that is in the world. So understand that we all have bias. Absolutely. The question is, how many of us have the restraint to hold that bias back?
Right.
And think through the process to do the right thing, right? As far as resolving conflict or avoiding conflict.
Right.
So what I really think is, and it's funny we're having a mature conversation because I think it's safe to say that everybody at this table is 50 years of age or older. So we can relate to how things used to be when we were growing up and how things are now, because we've lived through the change, right? We've seen the shift. And as we know, we've mentioned across the table in the last 5 or 10 years how different of a shift we've seen in law enforcement. It's perceptive. And I know this topic has been the police and the public, and we focused a lot on the police and not really on the public. So I want to go into that, especially when I say greater the he is in me than in me in the world. The problem is the public is so much in the world. I don't believe in my heart of hearts we're going to see a drastic change in the police force and law enforcement as a whole. Why? Because they are the law. So from their initial perception, they're not doing anything wrong. What they're doing stems from them upholding the law, which is their job, their duty. I think we can all agree on that. If we want better police, and this is the hard part to really swallow, if we want better police and a different type of police, we need a different type of public. We need a better public. The problem is we have all these things, and I want you to speak on that because of your background. The problem is families, homes, how kids are being brought up, what they're being taught, their value system, their understanding of what it is to be mature and accountable. They don't know how to stay in their lane. So of course they don't know how to abide by rules or the law because they have such a really bad foundation of which to build on and to understand that. So if we weren't having so many acts of public disruption, we wouldn't have so much police corruption and police involvement in a manner that's not suitable to all of our views. So it's not so much about who to blame. It's more about how do we change it.
Well,
But the problem is society is in the finger pointing business, right? Who did this? Who did that? And whose fault it is. There's no accountability. There's no why, but yet there's no how did we get there in the first place?
I am going to respond to what you said since you kind of threw it towards me. It does begin with family, but if we think about a historical perspective, in the 60s and the 50s, what happened with the breakdown in the family was that they made it profitable for a woman to be on her own, to live and receive government benefits.
Claudine.
And so, yes, the Claudine perspective. So they made it important for her to say, look, I'm just going to not have a man. I'm going to do this all on my own. When anyone knows that in order for a home to function the way that it should, it needs a mother and a father. Both parents have to be
thank you,
present to raise their children. Both parents, not just one, both parents. So when the father, when his role was demasculinized, when he said, you know what, okay, so I can't be in the house with this woman because she won't have these type of benefits, and I can't find a job, then what I'm going to do is bounce around to these different families and spend a little time here, spend a little time there. So it started breaking down the infrastructure of the Black family unit.
I think the Black Family Unit has been under attack since it was brought over here.
Yes.
True,
Over
that's
40
true.
years ago, and they took them 85 years just to break down the African in order to get them to conform to what they were trying to get them to conform to.
Correct.
And what they learned, and this is what has been continuing in their mind, because we are the most attacked in this country, whether people realize that they have done the math or not, is the fact.
It's a fact.
That man,
No.
I can't take that man
No.
down head on. I can't do it. It's relevant every time you see the police stop a black person on the street. It's 5, 6 other officers trying to handle that one person.
Right.
They know I can't take that man down. And where is he getting all this strength from? He gets powered up by that woman. That woman is his power supply. She hit him off, and he goes out and he holds the fort down. So what am I going to do? I need to backdoor that. I need to poison the power supply. I'm going to attack the woman. I'm going to manipulate that situation. But first,
Yes.
once I get him at a weak stand, I'm gonna show her how he ain't a benefit to her situation. And I'm gonna run up in him real good first, right in front of her, so she'll feel like he's demasculated. He can't do nothing for me. I'm gonna go ahead and run with this so I can take care of my family. Opportunities have historically not been available in our community like they have been for everywhere else. And without
Let me.
transitional and reformatory systems within the community, these things are not going to change. Opportunities are not made plentiful to the people that have lived here who have built. And when you talk about implicit bias, a lot of times, from my perspective, implicit bias is based on frame of reference. If your frame of reference has been jacked up,
Yes.
you're gonna immediately have an
Yeah.
expectation that when you see something else, oh, here it come.
Right.
Let's get real stupid with it. If you got burnt by a stripper, you gonna think, man, if I mess with another stripper, I'm gonna get burnt.
Right.
If I done had a bad experience, whether it's personal or I saw it, because even if you saw it, that's still your experience.
Right.
And I
Yes.
saw it, and I
Yes.
feel like that was really negative. Even myself, even if I wouldn't stop, if the lights come on, first thing gonna come in my mind, what's finna happen? What's my
And it
next
shouldn't
move?
be like that. It shouldn't be like
It shouldn't
that.
be like
That's
that.
so messed
But
up.
also at the same time, as Dr. and Larry was speaking on, and you hit on, is we have to start rebuilding the household. We have to
Thank you.
reestablish
Yes.
the foothold in the household, because all the basics of nurturing and of what you learn of the world starts in the place where you start.
Right.
Absolutely.
And all of
Those
this.
fundaments come from inside. That moral fabric starts in that house. That nurturing of imagination and that I can do something better than what I see in front of me right now come from in that household. That understanding and expression of individuality starts in the household. Then when you learn I don't have to follow a particular standard, I can be a standard.
You know what? I just wanted to say this one other thing. If you take a look at other cultures, okay, for example, I know I'm using myself as a lot of the examples, but in my family, when I was like 5, 6 years old, we had 4 generations living under the same roof. I mean, it wasn't just a huge house, but I had my great grandmother, my grandmother. I had my mother. I mean, it was 4 or 5 generations living in the same home. And historically speaking, other cultures, such as Chinese or Asians or whatever, they have a lot of their family living in the same household. They have the influences of their ancestors so that they can remember. So all the stories that you heard about eating oatmeal and walking with paper bags on your feet to go to school. Those are
connection
things
to
that
your
you need
culture.
they need to still hear those
Their
things.
roots.
But we're so disconnected when we are taught, oh, okay, when you're 18, get the hell out my house. You on your own now. I brought you through the high school, so goodbye. And you know, my son can always return home. My son is 30 years old, and if he fell on hard times or he needs to return home, my door is open for him. I'm not just going to cast him out into the world and say, okay, no more help, go on about your business, because a lot of people have that mentality that all I have to do is make it to their 18th birthday and I don't have to do anything else.
Well, it's what you do up to that 18th birthday that defines that movement.
When you got to go.
When you
Right.
got to go, because at some point, what you don't want to be is a crutch
An enabler, right?
or
Exactly.
enabling to your kid.
Right.
Because you want to be able to say, I'm going to fortify you with all that I am and all that I know in order for you to go out into
To
the
prepare
world
yourself.
to survive. But in order for you to know that you can do it, I got to let you go out.
Right, but
I'm
they're
gonna be
not
there.
even. But
I'm
that's
gonna be there to advise you
Right.
and guide you. But you're gonna stumble and fall.
But-
It's
but-
okay
but-
to stumble and fall. You're gonna get up on your own. The only time that I intervene is when I know it's beyond your scope. And that's when I stick my hand out and say, no, son, no, daughter, I got this.
Someone's ganging up on your seat. Exactly. So
right, but that's
said a lot.
that's because what you're saying is indicative of a household that has great parenting skills, that has great nurturing skills. But
So,
most of the youth that I encounter are in homes where the mother is on drugs, the father is a gang member, or the father has been incarcerated for some time, and you know, then you have the legacy of teen parents, like the grandmother is 33 years old and she already has a grandchild. You know what I'm saying?
But then we
So-
need to go back to the village perspective. What you think, Ty? We need to go back to the village perspective where we raise each
there's all
other.
of this. Look, that was a lot to unpack. So let me take it back up to like the 75,000 foot level, right? And just full disclosure here, I wanted to know because Dell and I used to talk about other things and discuss documentaries and everything else. I actually did the 23andMe and got my DNA outlook. It's a very small percentage, like 2% or less. I am North and East African. And that's because of the way that the Austronesians, they're the first people that left Africa, right? So anyway, I did a lot of research in how the system of control has been placed. So yes, black families, the black nuclear family in particular, has been under attack for centuries, right? Quite literally, when people were stolen and brought here, they separated families because there was a means of control. And I could go on entire different diatribes of all the other psychological implications of having a family, nuclear family, broke right there. Are they going to sell this person to this place? This nuts, this crazy stuff. But we'll come back to another topic that I just heard in all of this too. The reason why we have so much negativity is it depends on which form of control you believe is being exerted on us, right? So you could go the Aldous Huxley Brave New World approach, where your pleasures control the people. We're gonna get these people under control by giving them what they like. That's why goofy songs like Cardi B and what's her name had that WAP song, which I won't repeat here. They're appealing to your basis stuff, right? Your basis desires or functions. But then there's the other side, and this is where I think we're talking about these biases, where you can operate out of fear, like George Orwell, 1984. And that's what you see. That's what, quote unquote,
It's a good book.
the melange of the media, whether it's quote unquote news, I don't even trust the news anymore, news or your entertainment is a mix of all this Huxley stuff to control you with stuff. Like, why is it that, and I'll give you an example from my upbringing in Europe for the time I was there. Why is it in Europe if they had like shampoo commercial, they could have a woman whole naked topless in the shower? They know what they're doing. She's got her breasts out. Ooh, I'm gonna look at that. They would go nuts over here, but over here we can watch TV shows on broadcast TV. Someone getting shot in the chest, someone getting shot in the head. What does that tell you? Violence is okay, but things that might lead to reproduction and more families, more people, not okay. So I'll leave that, I'll leave that in the background
And
here.
social
But the
compass.
nuclear family thing, the fake feminism, talking about I don't need a man because I can get all these government aid programs. You end up with a vicious cycle of, and I run into them all the time. And before my mother remarried, I was almost down that path myself, where you have a woman raising a man, and maybe it's unpopular, but I'm going to tell you my experience. It cannot be done. A woman is a woman. It takes a woman to raise a woman. It takes a man, not a grown adult boy, but a man to raise a man. And if you don't have that, the boy is going to latch on to whoever he feels is dominant as a man. And if that role model is the GD down the street or the king down the street or whatever, that's what they're going to think is cool. Or worse, they latch on to these artists that they see on TV, like, oh, it's cool to slang or this and that. But it's not cool to be a nerd and learn things or want to be an engineer or be a doctor. That stuff is square. It's not for me anyway. What's the chances I'm going to get, a scholarship to do this or get college funding to do that? So this whole attack on the nuclear family, it branches off into so many other complex and horrible, in my opinion, topics, right? Like, I hate it. Like, I love music. They'll love music. They'll make music, right? So I love music. If you put crap, and I'm going to say crap unapologetically, over a good beat, hell, I'll listen to it. I've been caught up. I'll be nodding my head something. Then I listen to what they're saying. I'm like, let me just go ahead and change the channel. I can't do it. It's like ocean waves beating on rocks. Now, granted, rock is stronger than water for a minute, but eventually it will wear down into your psyche. And if all these messages are going into the youth and even adults, it's cool to get over. It's cool to get over. It's cool to get over. We got to get it over before they get over on us. Where's the love? To me, that's not love. That's operating out of fear. And that's why I also tell, like, another example, dogs. Why is everybody so scared of pit bulls or Rottweilers? You know who I'm scared of? I'm scared of the family that has raised a golden retriever from birth. Never put the golden retriever through crazy obedience and mobility school. Never put it through crazy guard dog school where it knows to strike on command and knows all the attack points on, to defend the family. I'm talking about a family dog. That dog is operating out of love. So when the things the dog loves, the people, its pack that it loves are threatened, what's the reaction you get? It's just as strong, if not stronger, than someone who's raised on fear and hate. So that's where I think we need to get back into this mode of showing, look, officer friendly exists. The scary thing to me is that we have a lot of law enforcement professionals at the federal and local level who are doing the right thing and don't give it, a hoot that they're getting recognition for. They're doing the right thing even when no one's looking, because that's the way you're supposed to do it. That's the right thing. But those are far and few between, unfortunately. And by the way, there might be more of them, but you don't see them because it's on purpose. These people aren't doing it to collect accolades. They're doing it for whatever personal reason they have. Maybe they're like, man, I don't ever want to be done like that again. So when I grow up, I'm going to join the department, and I'm not playing that.
Well, here's the thing.
And
Don't you think a proper acknowledgement of those officers doing what they're doing would help?
don't get embarrassed, though, for real. They get like, hey, man, don't make this about me. They'll be like, yeah, don't make this about me. They'll be like that. They're really, really good, in my opinion. I'm not saying that you can't get your 10 minutes, your 15 minutes in the spotlight. You deserve to definitely celebrate that. But some cats are they're so giving that they wouldn't want to come up in conversation like that.
But that's okay.
Right?
A healthy
Yeah.
accolade of somebody doing something right stimulates that person in some fashion or another, and it also brings a better perspective and light to the department versus what is constantly out there. You can have a bunch of people say, I hate the police, except for her,
Yes.
except for him.
Yes.
Why specifically? Because it's the things that they do, it's the works that they do, the deeds that they do in the course of their day that are done without question, without thought, but done in passion, that make them stand out.
The grease will get the oil. You're right, man. Like when people do something good, why don't you hear about it?
But let me
It's
ask you this
only
thing.
if that news station got time for, a human, they call it a human interest story.
Well, let me ask you this.
We're all human. We've got all our interests,
We're clearly stating that we are living up to the stereotype that's being put out there to us about the people in our community. I mean,
Living
example,
down.
Yeah.
living down.
Living down to the
I'll
stereotype.
take that. You're absolutely right. Because a prime example, the young lady, it was on the social media, of course, it was on the news. Got shot by a police officer. She called the police because she said a bunch of girls were trying to attack her.
I remember that.
And she, instead of staying in the house and remaining the victim, she come out in the house and she's fighting and she's going at somebody with a knife with the police sitting right there. They have not identified which one of them is the person that actually called the
Who's the
police.
perpetrator?
Right.
And
This-
say see somebody chasing somebody with a knife, they think, oh, she's the offender. Drop the knife, she don't drop the knife, she about to kill that girl, I can't let her kill her. Pow, shoots her. Then it blows up in the media.
Right.
But I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah, crooked ass media
we
made
need
it
to change.
anti-cop thing.
We need to change what's going on that other end in the public. We talking about family. These are one of the things. These young folks don't know how to reel it back.
Right.
Once somebody is there to provide them help and service, they actually kick it into overcharge and try to fight still with law enforcement, or even not even just law enforcement, other adults present. But the part of that problem, it goes back to what I was saying. If
hard
if
head, man.
the community is damaged, the kids gonna be damaged. The village damaged, because Morgan Park had a social distance graduation 2 years ago. The kids and the parents were fighting at the dang on graduation. How does that happen?
That's how you know. I know, right? Well, I'll tell you. You know, you train martial arts. I train martial arts. We do weapons handling and everything else. The first thing that you should be taught when it comes to potential for deadly force is de-escalate, avoid. And I'm going to put it to you bluntly, because I wasn't always a good kid. I was taught that you avoid the fight, and then when you get cornered, yo, gloves off, hurt them. If need be, kills them. That's the mentality. These people don't have that, and you can tell. If your first response to a situation is your fists or whatever nearest blunt object you have to pick up, clearly the home training is destroyed. It's not there. You just have people that are adults, but they're not men and women. They're just humans that have aged to a
They're
certain
just of
degree.
age.
That's it. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem. Like the doctor said, we have grandmas out there that are 33 years old. What kind of life decisions have been made? What kind of encouragements were given to maybe not promote that lifestyle, but to accept it? It's set a
It's
very low
acceptable.
bar.
Right.
Right? This is why, you know, I look younger than I am, but this is why I'm such a huge proponent of the nuclear family. I love it when I see people work it out. I love it when I hate that baby mama and baby daddy are accepted vocabulary words in our language. What is that? It's just supposed to be daddy and mommy. What is that? I
Lack
can't
of
get it. Like
responsibility.
I'm a member of. Yeah, lack of responsibility, this fake feminism, and I believe in feminism, but I don't believe in fake feminism. I believe in BLM. I don't believe in no fake George Soros man BLM, though, where the money comes from and who are the tops, who are doing all. No, I don't believe in that.
And that's a whole
But-
other topic.
Yes, it is. I could go on, and I apologize. I don't want to take us off on a tangent.
Let me hit you with this question.
Go ahead.
Having said what we have said thus far, understanding what it is that's standing before us right now, what do you feel on both sides of that coin is the solution? The solution in regards to police, the solution regarding to the people. Ty, you hit it. Go ahead.
So I've already hinted at a little bit, right? So we need to have more investments in the community, both on and it shouldn't be both sides, because if you do true community investment, they're just different roles of the same members of the same community. Then it's not going to be a us versus them. Now it's going to be a blend, because not everyone's going to rise to the ranks. Not everyone wants to stop being on beat. Not everyone wants to get promoted to DT. Not everyone wants to be a lieutenant. None of that stuff. Not everybody wants that, and that's okay. Know your role. If that's your goal, that's your goal. You want to make a difference, you feel like you can be boots on the ground, do that. But that ratio needs to be improved. And then from the other side, I feel like we need to push things like the Police Explorers program. We need to have more positive contact, right? And it can't just be caught by coincidence because, my buddy Ray He went to Morgan Park, and he moved back over here now, and he's an officer, and he's on whatever department or whatever whatever block. He's here. You can't have it happenstance. It has to be more intentional than that. And if we don't have that kind of promotion or leadership, from the top, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen in a large enough, big enough way to make an impact. So you can't just that's like playing the lotto. Like, oh, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe someone will come back. I mean, look at me. The irony is, I'm in Northwest Indiana, and for a while I would come back and forth, but my kids are in school here and everything else. It just got too out of hand, and I'll be honest with you. There's stuff that's coming over here now. Just today, they had schools on lockdown because they're getting these threats called in. I think last month, Hammond Central High School had shootings outside. Now that's why I tell people all the time, it's not a Chicago thing, it's a society thing. Because you can get it in New York, you can get it in LA, you can get it in Houston, it's everywhere. So I think, like I said, more community involvement and membership from the law enforcement community, and then more inroads by the community into law enforcement. And then I think ultimately this kind of base layer for all of this is a return to family values and promotion of the nuclear family. You ain't square if you have a mommy and daddy. You're not square. That's the default. That's the default. That's not the exception. And things have been manipulated through economics and government policy to make it the exception, or to make it the less prevalent living scenario for families. It's awful. I mean, I'm a result of it, but thankfully my mother did remarry, and I was able to get some sense from my I call him my dad, even though he's not my father, because he was the one who taught me to be a man.
I'm going to give a more local answer as opposed to a global perspective. So
okay.
I think that, and no, I'm not saying that I'm just going to give more of a local perspective. I think that in the city of Chicago, the surge of violence and everything that has happened as of late kind of speaks to a lot of things that younger children are indulging in as they weren't before. So they're using the ecstasies, they're using the cocaine and the heroin. They're using different types of drugs than people were normally dealing with. For example, this one young man actually killed someone that was living on the next block, and he came back and stood in the crowd because he was too high to know that you shouldn't come back and stand in the crowd and you just shot somebody. And then when he went to jail, he didn't realize that he was there for a murder. Because now the drug has worn off, and he said, what did I do? So he was really upset about that. And you're also dealing with the fact that when black neighborhoods in Chicago, because Chicago's so segregated, were thriving, what they did was make the grand, bright decision to close all of our concrete jungles where all these people were centrally located for generations, and disperse them in places like Chesterfield, places like Chatham, where you had a lot of different gang factions coming into a place that they may never have been taught how to keep up their own property because they didn't have their own property. Then you had older people who were no longer able to maintain their property. So now they were allowing Section 8 vouchers. So a person who has a mentality, well, this is where I lived all the time. I never had to take care of grass. This is how we resolve conflict. But you didn't do anything to reintegrate them into a mainstream type of situation. You're going to have a lot of resurgence. You're going to have a big surge of violence. You're going to have a lot of things that with people not getting along with each other. That's just like having somebody on if you're in a jail and they're on the 10th, the 10th, Division 10, and then you're mixing them in with Division 9 and everything, and you're telling them we got to all live together when they were used to doing things their own way. This is how you're going to end up having problems. So what we have to start first is rebuilding our neighborhoods block by block. We have to show by example. Oh, I know that you're probably renting your home, which I'm not saying anything about you renting your home, but everybody else's grass is cut on this block. So let's all get together and help her and cut her grass. You know, if I see somebody's grass is growing taller, or if I see if trash is on their property, I'm going to help them. So you're going to lead by example. So instead of saying, oh, well, they're Section 8, what do you expect? Show them how it's supposed to be, because they were never taught that. They didn't know. So we have to start helping each other on the community level first, and then move out.
Piggybacking that, again, but that's the history, again, not just of Chicago, but of the world, is that no implementation of reformatory or transitional systems. Same thing that
Right,
happened with the
none.
people in the projects,
None.
happened with the people that worked in the steel mill.
Absolutely.
You had people working in the steel mill for years, mastering of their craft, and then they shut it down, and then they said, okay, go live. And they said, well, hold on, I'm gonna give you this scalpel, now you a doctor. How am I a doctor if you never prepared me for that position?
Absolutely.
How am I gonna fit into a regular 9-to-5 job if all I know is the steel mill? What did you prepare these people to transition to in order to provide and take care of their families?
They didn't.
Nothing.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing with the people that coming out of these low income areas and putting them in the neighborhood. What happens when you have an absence of transitional and reformatory system? You bring the same habits that you had down there to the place where you live now.
Absolutely.
You never lived in a house with a nice lawn, with all of the amenities that a house has to provide. You don't understand that I gotta go cut the grass. I can't barbecue in the front lawn. I got a backyard.
Right.
I need to paint. I need to make sure my edges are clean. I have to pay all of these bills. I have to wash these dishes. I have to move the garbage myself from the house to the alley, because maintenance ain't gonna come over here and get it for me.
Correct.
Yeah.
If the thought process haven't been made to evolve to help them transition into a more middle class situation, then they're not going to do it successfully. And that's with anything else. That has historically,
But they got-
anybody coming back from a live campaign from the military, who has ever got transitional back into civilian life? You're supposed to get debriefed when you come back.
Absolutely.
You had so many
Yeah, it's only very
Korean,
recent.
Vietnam, Desert Storm veterans that have never been debriefed and prepared to return to society.
Correct.
And they are out in the world, not to mention the narcotics that was provided to them while they were over there to keep them moving.
Right.
Exactly.
And now they come
Exactly.
back here
So-
in their dependency, they don't get no offering. Sure, you got,
The Office of Veterans Affairs.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
that, but I mean, even with them, it's only so much that they can cover.
Correct.
There's only so much that they can
Right,
cover,
and-
especially if you haven't transitioned these people over when they come back. You leaving them to the dogs. And it's the
Well,
same
what's-
thing with
what's
these
the joke,
people in the
right?
community. And now,
Good
same
enough
thing
for
with
them to
them.
work. That's-
They're gonna
that's
come
the
across
therapy.
the police.
Huh.
The police don't understand where they're coming from their background. They haven't taken the time to watch them and see what's going on. And they don't understand what's coming at them other than this aggression. And they respond to it the only way that they know how to respond to it. These teenagers today are so emotionally detached because of the lack of a solid household, as Larry and Dr. just said.
Yeah. Well, let me bring you a current event. That's why they clown Russell and Sierra all the time. They see him as the simp. They're like, "Oh, you taking care of someone else? And see, you a punk, man. You taking care of baby future." What is that? We're again operating out of fear, not love, not thinking bigger than yourself. I had to check somebody the other day talking like this because I said, "So what do you feel about people that are bachelors that adopt children? Because there's plenty of children in the world that don't have parents for some reason or other.
Right.
What about them? Oh, they cucks and there's some what they say, cucks and simps too." And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm here and you over here. I can't. So I disengaged from that. But I will tell you that this is the uphill battle you are facing, and I'll draw one more comparison for you. The Matrix. You said that people are not used to having to take care of themselves or take care of property, things like that. People sometimes don't want the red pill. They want the blue pill that's comfortable. Let me stay in the projects because the level of expectation is lower. Right? I'm trying to. We're in the projects. You too bougie. You got an edger? What's an edger? You sitting out here with your safari hat on and you trimming the hedges? What is that?
square, bro. Get out of here.
But
That's
that's
what you hear, and
through
I
conditioning.
Right.
That's through conditioning, not nurturing. That's through conditioning. People that were
But-
in the
but it's
matrix were
hard.
constantly conditioned to make that mindset to stay where they are and not want to move any other direction.
And mind you, we have these little devices.
'Cause you don't know
phones
there's no
in our faces
options.
all day, and they're looking at what, man? They're looking at these goofs on social media, living a lavish life to program them. I can't tell you how many people would say they would rather be Future than Russell. That makes me sick. That makes me sick. I'm like, wow, we're done. We're done. We're done. Because if you think that's your role model, that's cool. This is that whole get over mentality. You're choosing to leave civilization, in my opinion, right? Civilization cannot exist without specialization, which means you got to pick a trade. Go do something. I'm not saying go to college. College is not for everyone. In fact, I think a lot of times college is a scam. They're gonna let you run up this six-figure debt that you can't even bankrupt yourself out of. And they sat there and encouraged you to take this curriculum in basket weaving or something that you can't get a job in. Well, I talked to my guy Larry or somebody, he got his CDL, he makes well over 6 figures a year. Or I talked to another buddy of mine who's an operating engineer. He's up here operating them cranes, building the buildings downtown. Also doing well. But people look down on that. People don't know their options. So people think, the only way out the hood is if I make a record or if I hit it big and I start hooping in the NBA. Not everybody can be D Rose. Come on, man. What is that? What is that? So I don't know how to attack this. We got to have something that's cool. That's still cool. Like and another current event I'll bring up to you. Nipsey was trying to do that. Mind you, he was a lifelong Crip, a rolling 60, and he was still talking about community, taking care of your family, your wife, your queen. Know what she wants. You shouldn't have to do all this work. It shouldn't be up here. You should just know because you study her. You care about her. And it's not just a man-woman relationship dynamic. It's also father-son or mother-daughter. Like, little miss, why are you leaving the house dressed like that? Are you trying to become a young mother? We don't have these talks. We don't have these talks. It's square. And I'll leave it at that because that'll get us into hour 3. And speaking of young sons, I have to dip out in a minute here because the 2-year-old is downstairs terrorizing my wife. Okay. I can hear him through the floor. So.
Well, Ty, we truly appreciate you participating. And Larry, bring us on with what your thoughts are.
So, going backwards a little bit so we can go forward. Unfortunately, we will never see that dynamic that Dr. Tillman talked about as far as different generations residing underneath the same household. Because back in that day, it was somewhat economically necessary, right?
Absolutely.
We have a
It
such
still is.
we
Oh,
have
it still
such
is, though.
well, we have such a individualized world we live in, and it's about me, I. So people want to get out and have my own. See, most of us at this table come from a mindset to whereas if someone in the household had something, we had something.
Absolutely.
Now it's, well, I got this. What you got? I got that. What you
Oh,
got?
it's awful.
I got this. What
That's
you got?
awful.
Well, he
Right.
got this. What do you have? And that's the problem. It's a foundational, and we talk about this in the ministry all the time. It's foundational curses, right? We have to break the foundational curse that we as a people and society have accepted. And we've accepted it as being the norm. We haven't accepted it as being a problem. We've accepted it as being the norm.
We conformed.
Awful.
So now
The bar is so low.
the bar is very low,
Yeah.
but regardless to where the bar is only being used as a separatory device, something to separate us instead of something to unify us.
Absolutely.
That is the problem. So when I dropped this little nugget earlier and I talked about we're focusing on the police, let's talk about the public. The problem is the police can't fix our communities. We have to. It's our responsibility to police our own actions and practices. If we show something's acceptable, it's going to be thought and acted on as being acceptable.
Absolutely.
So now we're talking about role models, right? We're talking about families, what these kids see and what they're reenacting. And Ty talked about it earlier about, well, I want to be like this because I see him and he a G and that's weak and that's soft. Here's the problem. We need to get back to the basics. We need to tear it up and start over again. And the best way to do that is from a parental standpoint. We have so many people that are not ready to be parents, trying to be parents, trying to do the best they can, trying to do what they see everybody else do to get over, to get by, to take shortcuts. There's no work anymore. There's always the next get. How can I get this? No one has the mentality of the work it takes to get from A to B. People want to go to Z, X, W, and everything in between. So here's the thing. We talk about conflict resolution, right? I talk about how there's only certain things we can change that are within our control. We need to focus and control and take ownership of what we can control. And that's our households and our communities and the examples that we set forth, right? So the only way we're going to get better police is have better people, better public. We need to stop worrying about what the police are doing right, wrong, or indifferent and police ourselves. Because here's the thing. If we just play takeaway and we take out some of the variables that we are stereotyped with, that we are perceived to have and be about, then they got to find a whole different criteria in which to judge us and act upon us with. They can't get away with the same old, same old. If we take it away, then they can't use that. Right. And that's the mindset that we need to get to, because people today are, again, so much in the world. You can't fix what's wrong with the world with worldly practices and activities. It doesn't work. You can't cure hate with hate. You can't cure distrust with untrust. It's got to come with love. When we do something, it's got to come from the heart. It's got to be out of love. Listen, I love the fact that the police are here to protect us, but I don't love the manner in which they're using to protect us. There's got to be somewhere in the middle that both sides can meet, but until you own your side of it, the other side doesn't have an opportunity to react to what you're doing that's right. They'll only react to what you're doing that's wrong. And as we know, the society we live in, what's being done that's wrong is going to get all the glory and all the attention, as opposed to what's going on that's being done right. So we talked about fear, right? I truly believe in my heart of hearts that the public fears the police and the police fears the public. That's why they so quick to grab that gun, because they're in fear. See, fear is actually an acronym, but it's a different acronym for the public and a different acronym for the police. Here's the acronym for fear for the police. Forget everything and run. Forget all your training, what you're supposed to do, what the protocol is. When they're faced with something they fear, at the end of the day, that R stands for run. They run the other direction. The public, on the other hand, fear. The first three are the same. Forget everything that they've learned, they've been taught, they've been told, they've been communicated, and riot. That's how the public has gotten with fear now. Forget everything and riot. Police, forget everything and run. Because when there's a riot, the police go another way. Because now they fear for their safety. But aren't you guys supposed to be here for our safety? So that's where we have the disconnect here. There's too much worldly activity trying to be adapted to and corrected by worldly actions. There's not enough God in the things that we do as a people. We've tried it our own way and it's gotten us this far. And now we're orating the fact that we don't like it. We don't like where we are. We don't like what it's come to. Okay, so we're voicing that, but we're doing it worldly. We're doing it worldly. We're doing it locally, from town to town, city to city, state to state. But we're doing everything we're doing worldly. And I know nobody wants to hear about God. Nobody wants to
I
talk about God.
absolutely want to
Nobody
talk about
wants.
God and hear
Nobody
about it
wants to
because it's
say,
important.
"Oh, I don't want to hear all of that."
Yeah.
But think about
do that.
think about this. The further we've gotten from the Word of God, the more chaos we're in.
Absolutely.
It's not
mean,
simply a thought process. It's become a human consciousness. I can do this all by myself. If you could, would you have ever chosen to be where you are right now? And we know that answer is no.
Ooh, them,
Well,
them
it's
tough questions.
about
They'll
it's
run.
about
They'll
the-
run it down. Yeah.
It's about the survival of a civilization. Unfortunately, that's not what we live today. Survival of a civilization means that every intricate part of that civilization has importance, and it should be nourished and allowed to evolve into the greater version of itself. So the fruits of its labor come back to feed for the survival of that civilization. Unfortunately, we are not there. We are not there. Can we get there? It'll happen in time, but we have to be the ones that start the wheels to rolling and not sit around and wait for it to happen by some immaculate conception. We have to make it happen ourselves.
You know what I want to know? I want to know who came up with the brilliant idea that it should be so politically driven. For example, why is the mayor considered the top cop, the person that makes the decisions, when they've never been in the field, they've never had to shoot a gun, they've never had to learn how to interact with the public on a one-to-one basis? So why are they the people that are in charge? Why would the mayor's office be in charge of the police department? That's
I
mind-boggling
can
to me.
answer that question by simply saying, for me, when you talk about voting, voting is most important in your city and state municipalities.
I agree.
And
But Kentucky's
understanding again, this is about being informed in the community of which you live. When you're voting, it's having that understanding that the people that you vote for where you live are civil servants. Their job is to provide to you in your community what it is that you need in order to survive and thrive. The problem is most of the people within our community are not informed and educated enough to understand what their options are. So that's why it's easy for a politician to come in and say, hey, vote for me, I'm gonna give you a ham, a turkey, and a link card for a month. And they jump right on that. When you look at the businesses that are put up in our community from these people that come in that are new to the country, they come in and they tell them, hey, you can have this loan, I'm gonna give you this, business license for this, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, by the way, all of this stuff has always been readily available. It's just the people that live here in the communities don't want it.
They don't know.
That's the lie that they tell them. But then what they hit them with on the sidebar is, go open whatever business you want.
Right. What about
You
like,
can't
historically?
open it in our neighborhood.
Right.
You don't have a gyro shop or a taco shop or a beauty supply shop or a wig shop in Mount Greenwood.
No, you don't.
You don't have a corner store, liquor store, convenience store in
Right.
Headwish or Wrigleyville,
See?
but you got them in our community.
Why is that? I'm telling you,
It's crazy.
it's a change in consciousness and a change in agenda. And I will say this, because I got to go get this little man downstairs. But think about why that is. Why is that? All right? And I'm not trying to quote KRS-One from BDP, but maybe listen to that too. Just want to refresh some of my mentality. Why is that? Okay? How many people, if you talk to young people, how many people that haven't seen, and by the way, they took it off the air, Michael K. Williams died, okay, but that haven't seen, what do you call it, Lovecraft Country. That was a dope series, and they talked about something that you guys just touched on, building back the community for itself. You gotta operate from a position of leverage, a position of power yourself before you help others, right? For example, when you get on an airplane, what's that little card say? If you're traveling with someone elderly or a young child and experience cabin depressurization, please put your mask
Mask
on
on
yourself first,
Right.
so you can help others who are
Mhm.
not capable of doing so. That's
Exactly.
not selfish. That's logic. That's logic. So look, and I just go back real quick. The reason why we're seeing all of these businesses open up that aren't from the community but seem to profit from it is, I hate to say it, it's by design. Whether it's redlining policies by businesses or it's a difference in community, and that's accountable as well. Like, did you know? Like, let's say I'm not picking on them, right? But the Indians, they own all these convenience stores. Don't you know they do something like, what is it called? And help me here. There's a term for it where the community does internal lending, internal banking. Like, isn't it called like a susu or something? I
Yeah.
forget. They do it.
Yeah.
They do it for each other. But mind you, you got to be careful because some of that community lending is predatory. Like, I'm gonna tell you this, and doctor, you probably go to get your nails done maybe, and those nail shops, it's the Vietnamese mob running those, and they are running them poor women in there ragged. You thought Uncle Sam took money out your pay? Psych. Go work for one of those. Those are real in your face sweatshops, and people don't like to talk about it. That's why it's always some dude running the shop, and he knows how to do nails too, but he'd be like the boss man. You're like, what's going on? He's taking a cut out of all of them ladies, and them ladies over there, they might not be here legally. But anyway,
That's
the
true.
bigger picture is just watch Lovecraft Country and watch the episode about Tulsa and what they did to Black Wall Street. That's happening again now. I'm following
we
stories where
talked
it's
about
happening again now, where people are just fed up, and I don't like it because I feel like if everybody leaves, you can't fix where you are or where you're from. And I'm guilty. And here I am. I'm in Indiana now, but I still try. Right? I'll make efforts one way or another. But the real stuff I'm seeing, people are just pulling up roots and making their own communities their way. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to build this. We're going to build this business here. We're going to build this community center here. That's almost what I think you were saying, Larry, is that you got a ground up rebuild. It's just awful that you can't do it kind of in situation.
Well,
It's too much stuff working against you to do it in situation, and you would need to have some pretty powerful friends to help you get it off the ground where you're at. So
Well,
I hate to
I
leave
wanna-
on such a weird note like that, but let me get a little minute. Thank you guys for listening to my spiel.
hey,
I appreciate
Ty, we want to thank you for participating in this very first podcast of Hard Corners. Minister Shores, Dr. Tillman, it has been my pleasure and the pleasure of, I'm sure, whomever reviews this podcast to hear your perspective in regards to the police and the public. And again, the only way that we're going to ever be able to reach that is we have to go back to the survival of a civilization, which is to return to the tribe.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. God bless you.
And God bless you all.
All right, bless you guys. Thank you so much.